is the most racist town in the United States.
Let's take a look at your people. Look at your people.
I wouldn't say after dark, man. Honestly, dude, you have balls of steel. You can get hospitalized by some guys that want to beat your ass.
I've had several old men come out here, look out the window and tell me, said, you better go tell that nigger to get out of here and shit.
No surprise? No surprise?
10 minutes, I'm gonna be back. You better be fucking gone.
Okay, come back.
Is that a threat? Is that a threat?
You're a white man. Right.
You're a dumbass motherfucker. You dumb shit.
So much
Are you
hate.
a Marxist? Communist?
Domestic terrorist.
Why don't you take me to Chicago or New York and call it out?
Chicago or New York?
Explain to me why I couldn't find that.
Real fucking job.
I'm Jesus.
That shit don't make shit here.
Hey, all lives matter, not just black.
You're Caucasian.
You're white. You're a white guy holding a black man. What's the deal with that?
I've been saying you're a white boy. Care that's different son. You're white, you're Archie. It's the same size. Yeah, black lives do matter, but what about ours, man?
Apparently black people's lives matter more than us.
Apparently. Got an Irish and
Get your people, dog. Get your people. Get your people. What's up, world? It's your boy back on the check-in. Told y'all the trigger words. What's today's trigger word? Black Lives Matter. Oh, it's not? It's not a trigger word? I dare you go into an all-white room and scream, Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. Guarantee someone changed colors. Say I'm lying. Say I'm lying. Okay. Now this one is Black Lives Matter, and it's coming from Wikipedia. So now I'm gonna give you the first, and it's 4 paragraphs, but I'm gonna give you the first, third, and last paragraph. And this is Wikipedia. We all know Wikipedia can be updated. What you see here today is probably not what it was 5 years ago. All right. Black Lives Matter is a decentralized political and social movement advocating for non-violent disobedience in protest against incidents of police brutality and all racially motivated violence against Black people. The broader movement and its related organizations typically advocate against police violence towards Black people, as well as for various other policy changes considered to be related to Black liberation. The movement returned to national headlines and gained further international attention during the global George Floyd protests in 2020, following the killing of George Floyd by Minneapolis police. An estimated 15 to 26 million people, although all are not members or part of the organization, participated in the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests in the United States, making Black Lives Matter one of the largest movements in U.S. history. Good job, Black Lives Matter. One of the biggest movements in United States history. The movement has advocated to defund the police and invest directly into Black communities and alternative emergency response models. One more time. The movement has advocated to defund. Let's look at what the word defund means. It doesn't mean to take out or cancel the police. It says defund some of the fundings and invest directly into Black communities. Let's be honest. There's a lot of people that don't want any of those fundings to go into black communities. The question is why? Why wouldn't they? Why? And alternative emergency response models, i.e., my relative has a mental disorder and there is a call for a mentally challenged person. Why do we need a person with a badge and a gun with zero clue and or knowledge about what it is to deal with mental disabilities? A badge and a gun for mental disability. Moving on. The popularity of Black Lives Matter has rapidly shifted over time, whereas public opinion on Black Lives Matter was net negative in 2018. It grew increasingly popular through 2019 and 2020. Drastic change, but why is that? A June 2020 Pew Research Center poll found that the majority of Americans across all racial and ethnic groups, you heard that? All Americans, racial and ethnic groups have expressed support for the Black Lives Matter movement. Carry on. Okay. Movement for Black Lives. Movement for Black Lives is a coalition of more than 50 groups representing the interests of Black communities across the United States. Members include Black Lives Matter Network, the National Conference of Black Lawyers, and the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights. Endorsed by groups such as Color of Change, Race Forward, Brooklyn Movement Center, Policy Link, Million Women March Cleveland, and One DC. The coalition receives communications and tactical support from an organization named Blackbird. In 2016, movements for Black Lives called for decerration in the United States, reparations for harms related to slavery, and more recently, specific remedies for redlining in housing, education policy, mass incarceration, and food insecurity. It also called for an end to mass surveillance, investment in public education, not incarceration, and community control of the police, empowering residents in communities of color to hire and fire police officers and issue subpoenas, decide disciplinary consequences, and exercise control over city funding of police. City funding. Politico reported in 2015 that Democracy Alliance, a gathering of Democratic Party donors, planned to meet with leaders of several groups who were endorsing the Black Lives Matter movement. According to Politico Solidaire, the donor coalition focusing on movement building and led by Texas oil fortune heir Leah Hunt Hendricks, a member of the Democracy Alliance, had donated more than $200,000 to the BLM movement in 2015. Okay, notable events and demonstrations. We're going to go most recent, 2020. On February 23rd, 2020, Ahmaud Arbery, an unarmed 25 35-year-old African American man was fatally shot while jogging in Glenn County, Georgia. Arbery had been pursued and confronted by 3 white residents driving 2 vehicles, including a father and son who were armed. All 3 men have been indicted on 9 counts, including felony murder. But, BLM, question we need to ask: why did it take so long? Months and months. Can we trust the system? Can we trust the system? Imagine those that were swept under the rug. On March 13th, Louisville police officers knocked down an apartment door of 26-year-old African American Breonna Taylor, serving a no-knock warrant for drug suspicions. Police fired several shots during the encounter, which led to her death. A boyfriend who was present at the time had called 911 and said someone kicked in the door and shot my girlfriend. Our protests were held in Louisville with calls for police reform. Months and months later. On May 25th, Christian Cooper, a black bird watcher at New York Central Park, experienced a confrontation with a white woman after he asked her to put her dog on a leash in a ramble, a no dog off the leash area. The interaction escalated when the white woman called police to say that an African American man was threatening her. If there's no such thing as racism or biasness as far as police goes towards minorities, why did she think it was okay to call 911 and said, a black man is threatening me? A black man is threatening me. If there's no truth behind racism, the bias policing and racism. Moving on. Reaction to BLM. The United States population perception of Black Lives Matter varies considerably by race. However, the majority of Americans across all racial and ethnic groups have expressed support for the Black Lives Matter movement. A 2020 Pew Research Center poll found that 60% of whites, 77% of Hispanics, 75% of Asians, and 86% of African Americans either strongly support or somewhat support. Strongly or somewhat support. So that would mean the other small percentage. What is that based on? The other small percentage. Is it hate? Is it anti that you have to be against someone? The majority of Americans support or somewhat support the Black Lives Matter movement. The phrase "all lives matter" sprang up in response to the Black Lives Matter movement. You just have to be against someone's struggle. But has been criticized for dismissing or misunderstanding the message of Black Lives Matter. Of course. Following the shooting of 2 police officers in Ferguson, the hashtag Blue Lives Matter was created by supporters of the police. Several leaders have disagreed with tactics used by Black Lives Matter activists. Public and academic debate at large has arisen over the structure and tactics used. In the weeks following the death of George Floyd, many corporations came out in support of the movement, donating and enacting policy changes in accordance with groups' ethos. Uh, Blue Lives Matter, unarmed citizens is not your problem. Unarmed citizens is not your problem. BLM International Movement. BLM International Movement. Solidarity. Australia stands in solidarity. Canada stands in solidarity. Denmark stands in solidarity. These are all Black Lives Matter movements throughout the world. France stands in solidarity. Germany stands in solidarity. Japan stands in solidarity. New Zealand stands in solidarity. And the United Kingdom stands in solidarity. These are Black Lives Matter movements around the world. And should I say as well, Africa stands in solidarity. Okay, now this next one we're going to do is counter slogan and movements. All Lives Matter. The phrase All Lives Matter sprang up as a response to the Black Lives Matter movement shortly after the movement gained national attention. Several notable individuals have supported All Lives Matter. Its proponent include Senator Tim Scott, NFL cornerback Richard Sherman supports the All Lives Matter message, saying, "I stand by what I said, that all lives matter and that we are human beings." According to an August telephone poll, 78% of likely American voters said that the statement "all lives matter" was closest to their own personal views when compared to Black Lives Matter or neither. Only 11% said that the statement Black Lives Matter was closest. Only 11%. 9% said that neither statement reflected their own personal point of view. According to Professor David Goldberg, All Lives Matter reflects a view of racial dismissal, ignoring, and denial. Founders have responded to criticism of the movement's exclusivity, saying Black Lives Matter doesn't mean your life isn't important. It means that Black lives, which are seen without value within white supremacy, are important to your liberation. President Barack Obama spoke to the debate between Black Lives and All Lives Matter. Obama said, "I think that the reason that the organizers used the phrase Black Lives Matter was not because they were suggesting no one else's lives matter. Rather, what they were suggesting was there is a specific problem that is happening in the African American community that's not happening in other communities." He also said that it is a legitimate issue that we've got to address. Now, we have a lot of people that's only lived on one side of the fence with opinions that's happening on the other side of the fence. So the inexperience, as far as brutality goes, is being shunned, spat on, or some of you guys even have your foot on the necks of people that's crying out with grievances. Really? Really? Blue Lives Matter. Blue Lives Matter is a counter movement in the United States advocating that those who are prosecuted and convicted of killing law enforcement officers should be sentenced under hate crime statutes. Hate crime statutes, but unarmed civilians trying to go home, the death of those civilians is justified because he or she had a criminal record. So a officer gets away with murder, and that's okay with you. All lives matter, huh? All lives matter. It was started in response to Black Lives Matter. It always has to be in response to something black. After the homicide of NYPD officers Rafael Ramos and, not going to give it any credit, December 20th, 2014, following the shooting of two police officers in Ferguson in response to BLM. The hashtag Blue Lives Matter was created by supporters of the police. Following this, Blue Lives Matter became a pro-police officer movement in the United States. It expanded after the killing of American police officers. It wasn't by unarmed. It wasn't by unarmed citizens. Criticized by the ACLU and others, the movement inspired a state law in Louisiana that made it a hate crime to target police officers, firefighters, emergency medical service personnel. Okay, white student union Facebook groups. In response to BLM, Facebook pages emerge purporting to represent white student unions on college campuses in the United States. The pages often promise a safe space for white students and condemn alleged anti-white racism on campus. The New York Times reported in 2015 whether the Facebook groups were started by students at the universities or by an outside group seeking to stir up debate is unclear. Representatives of the schools, as well as some students, have said that the groups do not represent their values. Other students complained that attempts by the university to remove these pages are a violation of free speech. White Lives Matter. White Lives Matter. White Lives Matter is an activist group created in response to Black Lives Matter. In August 2016, the Southern Poverty Law Center added White Lives Matter to its list of hate groups. The group has also been active in the United Kingdom, and White Lives Matter slogan was chanted by torch-wielding alt-right protesters during 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, where some of the protesters, they were decent people. Mr. President, October 2017, numerous White Lives Matter rallies broke out in Tennessee, dominated Shelbyville. Particularly, protesters justified their movements in response to the increasing number of immigrants and refugees to Middle Tennessee. Polls. The United States population perception of Black Lives Matter varies considerably by race. According to a September 2015 poll on race relations, nearly 2/3 of African Americans mostly agree with Black Lives Matter, while 42% of white Americans are unsure or do not have an opinion about Black Lives Matter. Of white people surveyed, 41% thought that Black Lives Matter advocated violence and 59% of whites thought that Black Lives Matter distracted attention from the real issues of racial discrimination. On that last part, 59% thought Black Lives Matter distracted attention from the real issues of racial discrimination. To the 59%, were you silent prior to George Floyd? Were you? Were you silent at all prior to 2015? Were you silent leading up to the Black Lives Matter slogan? And if Black Lives Matter didn't cause a ruckus, would you have even noticed or even paid attention? Is what I want to know. By comparison, 84% of Black people polled thought that Black Lives Matter was a nonviolent movement, and 26% of Blacks thought that Black Lives Matter distracted attention from the real issues of racial discrimination. On the question of whether Black Lives Matter was mostly a movement or mostly a slogan, 46% of whites and 67% of Blacks thought that it was mostly a movement. A nationally representative internet survey conducted by the Center for the Study of Diversity and Democracy at Northwestern University found that 82% of African Americans believe that the movement is at least moderately effective at achieving its stated goals. Although 64% of the respondents believe that the movement would be more effective if it had more centralized leadership structure. A poll in June 2016 found that 65% of Black American adults supported Black Lives Matter and 40% of white adults supported. 59% of Black Americans thought that Black Lives Matter would be effective in the long run in helping Blacks achieve equality. 35% of whites thought so. 2017 Harvard-Harris survey found that 35% of whites and 83% of Blacks have a favorable view of the movement. All right, now we're going to listen in on a few protesters around the world. UK. George Floyd. Vancouver. Vancouver. New Jersey. New Zealand. White people. White people. Australia. Anti-blacks hate it. I know you do. Just admit it. You anti-blacks hate it. All lives matter. But all life can't matter until their life matter. If you're here for the first time, let me get a thumbs up. Hit that subscription button if you're down with BLM. If you hate BLM, you can even hit the dislike button for all I care. BLM.